Hi, everybody. Greetings from Chicago and the USA. I miss you, Barcelona, and hope to be back soon. I'm Michael Silverman, here to talk about realistic valuation and exit strategies for your agency. You can reach me at MediaCurrent.com, one of the top Drupal agencies in the United States. Our mission at MediaCurrent is to bring together the most talented team members to improve technology for our clients. Check us out. We're just outside of Atlanta, Georgia. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. Why should you even care what I have to say? I've sold multiple businesses over a 35-year career. First, I started a company called PinDot, where we made products for people with disabilities. We were a manufacturer and a distributor, and our products are still sold today. When I sold that business, I had a non-compete. So I wanted to get into technology, but also came from that rehab side. So I started a community called Rehab Central in 1997. But around those days, I had to run around and plug in an extension cord into their fax socket just to get on AOL to show them what the internet was. So I started Duo in 1999, and we began with Cold Fusion, worked our way through Flash, and went all in on Drupal in 2009. After 21 years, Duo was sold to MediaCurrent, and today I hope to share some of what I've learned. Oops, go back. So the number one question people have is, how much is it worth? How much is my company worth? And the answer is it varies. It varies based on the ecosystem, what your profitability is, who your clients are, what kind of projects you do. Do you have managed services under contracts? How many people are doing the same thing that you're doing? How unique is it? And what has your growth been like over the last few years? What is your actual reason for doing the deal? This to me is key, is that you really want to have a reason. When you think about selling, you think about who you're going to sell it to and why do they want to buy you? If it's just that they want to buy you because you're doing a couple $1,000,000 a year, it's probably not a good fit. There should be a reason to do the deal. For instance, it could be strategic. They want to add the technology, they're interested in that vertical. They're already doing digital marketing and they need to add website development to their offering. Or it could be a technology play. They're a Salesforce firm with a lot of clients needing better content management. Or maybe it's a vertical. You're really strong in government work and the acquiring company is trying to get into that market. There must be a reason. What is the reason? That's really the most important thing. Once you know why, you know where the fit is from a strategic point of view, you can then evaluate the culture fit. That's the next most important thing. You can look at the deal complexity versus size, understand if there's a client concentration issue, and talk about owner compensation. So let's look at each of these for a minute. Culture fit. When I was going to do my deal with MediaCurrent, it wasn't the first people I was talking to. I talked to another suitor and we were doing due diligence and we're down the track. And to be perfectly frank, the guy was a real, it wasn't working that well. Numbers were fine, but we were clashing a lot. And I thought, do I want to work with this guy for the next 12 months or 24 months or 36 months? What about my clients and team? Will they be happy working with this guy? We could tell it wasn't a fit, so I stopped the deal, reached out to my friends at MediaCurrent, and we were able to get it done. How complex is the deal? The more you're worth, the more you can ask for, the more things you can have. I remember rock stars, needing 100 red M&Ms in their dressing room or something like that. So, if you're looking for $2 to $3 million, you really can't make it a complex deal. It's like, here's what I'm looking for myself. Here's what I'm looking for the company. It can't be too complex because people aren't going to want to spend a lot of time on it because it takes just as much time to do a $3 million deal as a $30 million deal. Client concentration is also an issue. If more than 30% of your business or so is from one client, it's going to become an issue for the buyer because if you lose that client, what do they really have? And then the last thing is owner compensation. In a closely held business, owner compensation can come in many different ways. It can be cars that you're leasing. It can be expenses that are put on, personal expenses on your business. It can obviously be other forms of compensation. It needs to be normalized. Normal compensation, let's just say, for example, would be for $1 million business or €1 million, $100,000 or $2 million business, say 150. I'm not saying those are the numbers, but pretty close. That number needs to be looked at against your financials for the last couple of years. What kind of salary are you looking for moving forward? Is that in line with the expectations from both sides? So those are some of the key points that you've really got to get out. Some of the goals of the session I'm going to cover include valuation, or what is the business worth? When will I get paid? And what are the terms? And what other things should I be thinking about? Valuation, there are really only 4 components: revenue, profitability, growth, and the industry you serve. First, for revenue, there are maybe 3 different groups. I kind of break it up this way: under 5 mil, 5 to 20 mil, and over 20 mil. And this could be dollars or euros. Under 5 mil is where I've been working and where many of you will be, and it's a great place to be. But it's not a great place if you want to get external help with selling your business, because there aren't really professional brokers that are going to really work with you under 5 million. There are companies that do it, but they probably don't specialize in our industry, and that's what you need. There are many factors that are going to affect the valuation of your business. Let's look at each of them. So profitability, that's really the key one. Breaking it into 3 groups here: under 5%, 5% to 15%, or over 15%. You may not be profitable if owner compensation is properly accounted for. So that's the first thing we've got to do, is normalize that. And then the sweet spot for a company that's been operating profitably for the past 2 to 3 years is a multiple of revenue to cost of people of about 2.5 to 3 times. So what we're, with our kinds of businesses, it's really salaries that you're paying. 90% of your cost is going to be, let's just say, in salaries. And then you want to be able to book 3 times in revenue what you're paying in salaries, including contractors, et cetera. Maybe 2.5 times. Much below that, it's going to be hard to be profitable. And the profitable is the EBITDA at the end of the month. And that's where I'm saying it's 5%, 10%, 15%, 20%. If you're hitting 20%, you're doing great. And if you're under 5%, it's pretty much zero, because exact accuracy on expenses is people are going to think there's a little variability there. So this is the famous earnings before interest, taxes, amortization, and is a common measurement for profitability. Earnings are presented on an annual basis by calendar year on the income statement, sometimes called the P&L. To that, you can add back the interest, taxes, and any expenses amortized over the years. Normalizing owner salary isn't quite clear, but I would use something like about 150K plus 50K per million. People value firms at 5 to 6 times EBITDA based on profitability. So if you're doing 2 million a year and you're making 10%, that's 200 grand per year times 5 to 6 times means your business is worth about $1 million to $1.2 million. If you're making 20%, then your business is worth about double that, $2 million. And if you're making 5% or less, it's going to be worth about half that number, maybe 500,000-600,000. What's the growth been? Are you just plugging along, doing okay, but growth is slowing? What's fast? Fast growth is like 50% a year or more. So if you're doing 4 million one year, it's 6 million the next, 9 million the next, 15 million the next. That kind of growth will give you a higher multiple. Are you the new hot thing, or have businesses like yours been around for a while? Different business sectors may be valued at 2 times, 4 times, even 10 times the multiple on EBITDA due to growth. For example, today, cloud businesses are all the rage, with values at least 2 times that of businesses that do not exist wholly in the cloud. If you've got people signing contracts for your business and those contracts renew annually, you've got recurring revenue. Your agency will also stand out with a higher percentage of recurring revenue billed monthly or annually on a contract, especially if it renews. Recurring revenue is often tied to stickiness, anything that makes it hard for the client to leave and go elsewhere. Acquia packaging Drupal with Site Studio may provide stickiness, as Site Studio is not available from any other supplier. What percentage of your revenue is from a single client relationship? If your client concentration is higher than 25%, a buyer may want to cut your valuation, maybe a lot. It really just depends on who that client is and how solid that relationship is. The opposite of client compensation is loyalty. How long have your top clients been clients of your firm? If the team is part of the deal, then client loyalty may also ensure a full payout on expected revenue. Depending on the history you are in, The value could change by 10 to 20% based on the industry you are in. The industries served by your agency are also a differentiator. Not surprising, as some industries are far more profitable than others. For instance, if you're servicing the financial services sector, those guys have a lot more money than nonprofits. And it's easier to drive revenue from clients that have money to spend from those that don't. Those industries where your firm's assistance can really make a difference can provide a higher level of profitability. And those tend to be B2C and e-commerce opportunities. So there are industries that are going to give you a higher valuation. Now, you're not going to get all that money up front. Some of that money is going to be at risk, which means this is what we're paying you, but it's going to be less if something happens. Usually we don't get the revenue we're expecting. Truly depends on how things play out. So a common example is a payout based on promised future revenue with any shortfall leading to less of a payout than originally expected. Then there's the all-important terms of the agreement. The terms for how you get paid define the at risk. For example, common terms for deals for companies like I'm talking about under 5 million is that you'll get 25% of what they're offering at closing, cash. The other 50% over time, usually it's just sort of a financing thing, maybe a cash flow thing. And then with the additional, say, 25% remaining at risk. Rarely do you get a full payment up front. Usually there's an upfront payment, little overtime, and upfront. Oops. So these are things that really make a difference, and you should think about them now. They're the intangibles. Where are you, and where do you want to be? Don't get too used to the cushy space because it may be difficult to maintain. So if we get into intangibles, there may be questions that you want to pay attention to that aren't really numerical, but very important. And you need to have clear answers to these questions. Many of them you'll be discussing before you even sign a non-disclosure. Like, what is your total sales? And is that net or gross? So if you're reselling Google ad services and you do 10 million of Google services and 5 million of support services, your gross would be 15 million, but your net is 5 million. You need to be able to clearly differentiate those types of numbers. What is your legal structure? In the US, is it an S Corp or a C Corp or an LLC? Do you have a client concentration issue? Are there any legal issues, like people have employment agreements that have guaranteed payouts, or somebody gets a car or something like that that you need to talk about? Do you have a non-compete in place for your team members that are going to move to the new company? Non-competes are more and more important these days, even for small companies. And are there assets or liabilities to call out that may further affect the deal? Under 5 million, you probably have to do a lot of the negotiation yourself. You can usually ask some of these questions without signing an NDA, but it's good to sign after the initial conversation. And then you work through the details, and then there's an LOI, or letter of intent, after the initial negotiation is done. Once you have an NDA in place, you're able to get more specific, like who owns the company and what are the ownership percentages? How many employees are there? Who's an employee? Who's a contractor? Who are we going to keep? Who are the key clients, and what is the revenue from each of these over the last 2 to 3 years? What services have been provided? What is a typical relationship structure? Then we move back to the qualitative factors. So let's talk about timing. I think there's a real market opportunity here for businesses like mine, with less than 5 million revenue looking to cash out. But that's now. You have to take into account the environment and act when the opportunity is there. And for that, I brought up this Gartner hype cycle, which is often shown around technologies and other new things. Everything goes through this cycle. I'd say Drupal is probably, past the peak, but certainly not at the bottom. We're probably just past the peak. We probably peaked in 2013, 2012, 2015, maybe something around that. There are windows of opportunity when companies are going to be valued more or less based on what the market is up to. And you need to pay attention to that. It's much better to do these types of deals when the market wants you than when they don't. So I think with Drupal specifically, there's probably an opportunity, let's say, over the next 5 years, but there may not be an opportunity 10 years from now. I can't guarantee the future, but that's an example. So some of the key takeaways that I'd like to cover with you. Whatever you think it's worth doesn't really matter. It's what other people think it's worth. And what I find when I talk to people in this price point is that they think the company is worth a lot more than somebody else will think it's worth. And if that's the case, and when you're talking to people, you're not really listening to them, you're going to cost yourself an opportunity. So what I think I'm telling you are realistic. If your company is doing more than five, realistically more than $10 million or euros, or is growing at least 25% annually, you're probably not going to get more than that 5 to 6 times EBITDA. And you're going to have a certain amount that needs to be held back. But there's key advantages to aligning with a larger company, taking some money off the table and thinking about your next act. Next takeaway is cash is king. Bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. So when you're negotiating a deal, the amount that you're getting up front or the amount that isn't at risk, okay, is important. I know one guy that in the buzzing internet days of about, I guess it's about 15 years ago now, he sold his company, for all stock to another company whose stock went down 90% in the first 6 months before he could get cash out. What are you going to do next is an important part of the equation. Most people don't just want to stop working at 40 years old and go retire on an island somewhere, even if that sounds tempting. Many of us, especially entrepreneurs that maybe grew a business, really define themselves through their work, and what they're doing is an important part of the equation. And this is why I said the culture fit is very, very key once you can get the financials that you're looking for. And whatever you decide to do, it makes sense to think about it in advance. This process, for me, was probably, 18 months, if not longer. I really thought hard about what I wanted to do, who I would want to sell to, what kind of valuation. I met with various people. I talked it through with them. And I tried to align it with when our business was really looking solid to be able to make this deal more palatable to a buyer. Because again, if they're doing a purchase of a small company, it's going to be a fair amount of work and not a huge revenue. So you have to make it sort of friction free for people. Okay. Any questions? Do feel free to reach out to me directly, Michael Silverman at Media Current. Media Current is also looking for additional acquisitions like this. So if you are looking for your next act, don't hesitate to reach out to me, Michael Silverman at MediaCurrent.com. Thank you. And join us for contribution opportunities. And please rate this program. Thank you very much. I was just looking for questions, but I don't see the questions tab. So do reach out to me, Michael Silverman at Media Current, if you've got any questions. Be great to hear from you. Thanks.